Marc Snuffy is a super interesting character for many reasons. Above all, that he's the polar opposite of Jinpachi Ego, and this makes him the most important character in the show. I love Jinpachi's philosophy, and I'll explain why later, but it's definitely not perfect. There's faults to it, dangerous ones, but Snuffy's words of wisdom balance it out perfectly with just one single line, which, as a heads up, we'll be going into some manga spoilers. As opposed to being focused on the solo glory of a goal-scoring striker, Snuffy is more focused on victory above all else, using teamwork and strategy as his method of doing so, even if it means him not getting the spotlight. Once again, the complete opposite to all of Ego's examples in episode 1, who would happily lose if it meant scoring themselves. As a result, he doesn't get the same level of glory as he maybe should. Until this point, we'd only ever heard about how great Noa was, and not a word about Snuffy, even though Noa admits that Snuffy is simply a better overall player, even if Noa is better as a striker. It's super interesting that he is so different to Ego, given that the two clearly used to know each other quite well, as we see from Snuffy commenting on Noa's old rivalry with Ego. But what's even more interesting is that Snuffy's new protege is one of arguably the most twisted, egotistical players in Blue Lock, which is really saying something. Somehow every video I make ends up coming back to Barou, who since day one has ticked every single box that Jinpachi was looking for. A striker who lives purely for scoring goals, with enough raw power to organise a team around him simply by existing. He'd rather score than win, and he'd rather lose than pass. A true tyrant who has no thoughts for the commoners around him. When it comes to choosing a team, Barou picks Ubers, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why. Remember, they had to choose before knowing about the Masters, so all he really had to go on was any knowledge of Italian football. It's possibly just because, based on this explanation, it sounded like he'd be the only striker there, so would have a team that works for him the way he wants. But either way, in chapter 214, King Barou meets the crown wayfarer, Snuffy, as we're introduced to Uber's master, with a very humble introduction for a man who's on his way to win his 5th major league trophy. Immediately after greeting Ubers, he asks, "What does football mean to you?" To which the Blue Lockers passionately respond by saying, "My dream, everything, something I would bet my life on." And Snuffy accepts these answers, but then proceeds to ask a chilling question. What would you do if you can't turn pro? What will you have left if football is taken away from you? He proceeds to talk about how there's nothing wrong with devoting yourself to something you love, but to remember that injuries and problems do happen. And so if they do, and one day you can't keep playing, what would you do? And it's not nice to think about, although you probably won't find it as awful to do so by the end of this video, but chances are we all have something that, if we lost, would likely feel like the end of the world for at least a little while. It's scary to think about, but that's precisely why Snuffy asked this question. It's vital to have an answer to that, as we'll see, because you would expect, given what he's asking and where he is in the football world, that he's also about to say football means everything to him too. But instead, Snuffy reveals that his answer is a job, which seems a little underwhelming at first, but let him cook. He makes a bunch of analogies between his Ubers and a regular job, and then, after declaring that those without an answer will forever be amateurs, reveals he's prepared a crazy list of strategies and tactics for the entirety of Ubers. However, whilst the rest of the Ubers players are excited and cheering, one man simply walks away, declaring Snuffy's philosophy weak-willed and irresolute, which probably shouldn't be too surprising. I've never been in a company where the king was a job title. To Barou and many other Blue Lockers, someone who doesn't treat football as life or death isn't taking it seriously enough. They're weak-minded. Remember, Barou is a guy who's lived in the frenzy of Blue Lock for a while now, where nothing exists except thoughts of aiming for the top, where Jinpachi's philosophy influenced everything. And now Barou's ended up talking to a guy who seems to see football so calmly. However, as we later find out, football does mean a lot to Snuffy. So why such a mundane answer? Snuffy goes to talk to him, asking Barou to at least try his philosophy, but Barou refuses, still bewildered by how different Snuffy is to everything he's used to by this point, and saying that Snuffy would have to adjust to his philosophy. Barou's always been very stuck in his ways. He was even willing to lose his spot in Blue Lock before passing, but Snuffy gives him a really important reminder, which almost this entire video revolves around. Before you are a footballer, you are just a person. If you can't understand that difference, you're just an amateur. The first time I saw this line, I didn't think much of it. In fact, I didn't even remember it until I reread this match to get ideas for this video. But the more I think about it, the more I absolutely love it. I've got 3 main points on this. The first and most important of which is to remember there's more to life than any one thing. It's easy to get caught up in the hype and excitement of relentlessly chasing after something, but don't forget that you're a person before anything else. As Snuffy says, whatever it is you're after, it can vanish in an instant. It could be a freak accident, it could be a mistake, it could be someone simply better shows up. Everything can vanish. And so you should never place your entire self-worth on any one thing, an accomplishment, a relationship, a career, because otherwise once it goes, it can leave a dangerous void. The only thing that'll be with you forever is yourself, and you've got a long life ahead of you, so make sure that not only do you take care of your health, and always prioritize that over anything else. Also be sure that no matter what happens to you, no matter what goes wrong, what mistakes you make, you're still able to love yourself when it all falls down, because it truly can happen in an instant. Because there will always be something else for you, you know. I absolutely loved the scene, but did you not think Barou was being a little dramatic when he thought passing to Isagi would cause him to end up like this? I absolutely love Igo's philosophy, the way it really inspires you to try something utterly impossible, to have the confidence and insanity to really go beyond what you currently can. That crazy bold attitude and the willingness to put myself first is definitely something I lacked before watching Blue Lock. Taking it on has definitely done me a world of good, and it's made Jinpachi one of my favourite characters of all time as a result. But remember, this is a manga. Not every single line is 100% accurate and applicable to real life. And if taken to the absolute extreme, his ideas can definitely be counterproductive, but also very unhealthy and unsustainable, which is obviously the most important thing, not just in general, but also for actually succeeding. I'm sure it wasn't actually his fault, but there's a reason these two are at the peak of the world, and Igo isn't playing anymore. Noah definitely has that egotistical side to him, but he doesn't take it to the same extreme as Jinpachi does. And for a man whose aura is a fiery phoenix, Snuffy really has a very calm, grounded approach to things. Personally, I found this reminder extremely beneficial because not only did it remind me not to sacrifice the important things like health for work, but also because it made me realize that even if I fail, even if things don't work out, I'll find something else. And with that reassurance, what's stopping you going all out? What have you got to fear? You can chase these crazy desires, and as long as you don't, sacrifice your personal responsibilities, who cares if you fail? Barou actually seems somewhat conscious of this by chapter 228, where he takes a reckless gamble of a shot between Isagi and Kaiser's legs, which was reliant not only on a double nutmeg, not only on Gagamaru not being able to save his shot again, but also on Snuffy pushing the world's best striker out the way. This shot not only showed Barou's respect for Snuffy, but also he was fully aware that this wasn't a guaranteed shot at all. There was a long list of things which could have gone wrong, but the proud king was fine with failing, not just in front of his rivals, but the entire world. He was prepared to die honorably, and he doesn't mean that literally, but rather that he would accept his fate wholeheartedly. And with that acceptance, he had no reason to fear failing. It's not that he wouldn't be frustrated when it happens. It's not that he wouldn't do everything he can to prevent it. It's that it won't be the end of him when it inevitably does. To Snuffy, this is his way of keeping himself sane and healthy, having seen what happened to his friend, a necessary reminder to help him through the inevitable disappointments and struggles that one encounters on the way to the top. He sees a bright future in Barou with his incredible skills and wants to pass down his gems of wisdom. In the very same chapter, 215, Snuffy reminds Barou that his talent is simply something that his parents gave him. Besides that, he's no different than the players he belittles. Barou is not too impressed by this, but Snuffy also says that he's no different than Barou, and that he too once got by purely on his talent and got extremely far. But remember what Prince said about how getting by on talent alone and not thinking about yourself as a person? Or how Ego warned about the dangers of succeeding above where you actually should? The thing is, no matter how badly you want something, no matter how talented you are, no matter what you do, you are just a person. Your talent is just a gift from your parents, and it's a gift that countless others will be blessed with too. If you think just being talented, working hard, or a combination of the two guarantees anything, there's a limit on how far you can go. Because as Barou found out earlier in the series, the world is full of people just as talented and hardworking as you. And both me and Barou had a very similar reaction on finding this out, one of utter despair that seems to shatter your very identity when you've built it around a single thing. A reaction of frustration, confusion, and above all, entitlement. I spoke about this in detail in this video here, but Barou expected to win purely on account of his talent and hard work, and as the stress of finding out this wasn't the case, forced him into denial that his old ways wouldn't work anymore, much like Snuffy's friend Mick, who refused to change his ways too. Eventually, in an instant, just as Snuffy said, both their spirits broke. And sadly for Mick, who couldn't see a life beyond football, unlike Barou, he never got his chance to be reborn from the ashes of failure. Barou thankfully did, and this obviously links very strongly into the first point, which spoke about how any number of defeats won't define you, but likewise any number of wins won't either. Although there isn't anything Ego says which directly implies this, he's more than smart enough to know this, but going too deep into his philosophy, seeing your personal skills and accomplishments as being above everyone else inevitably results in you seeing yourself as above everyone else too. No matter how hard you've worked and how successful you've become, once again, you're still just a person. If you stop working both hard and intelligently, you will be overtaken. We see Snuffy's friend Mick going through this in chapter 229, where after the two have been dropped from the starting lineup due to not taking their training seriously, the two have very different reactions to this, with Mick claiming he can just flip a switch and get back to where he was, whereas Snuffy having a smarter, more rational realization that they need to start from a lower level and build themselves back up. And I'm sure this event is why Snuffy sees the world he does, an approach that puts sustainability first. However, as I'm sure you remember, there's one man who sees Snuffy's view a little differently, leading on to the final point of the video. In chapter 227, Barou finally reveals his supposedly true intentions, that this whole time he just wanted Snuffy's techniques and he never really planned to go along with Snuffy's ideas. He says he wants to burn Snuffy's team strategies to the ground, hijacking Ubers and forcing them to play to his strategies rather than Snuffy's. You'd think Snuffy would be annoyed about this. Noah certainly expects him to be. However, Snuffy is just excited. I mean, he did say it was fine if Barou pretended, after all, but more than that, he wants to see what Barou can do. He wants Barou to try and surpass him. Something has relit in this old soul. He's excited. Barou then proceeds to say, he respects Snuffy's team, but he wants despair. He wants challenge because he knows it's necessary for him to grow. Barou is doing all this for his dream of being the king of football, a childish, nonsensical dream that no doubt reminds Snuffy of his old friend. And as mentioned earlier, this results in Barou scoring a phenomenal goal. Snuffy congratulates him, saying that he never could have predicted that goal, but Barou brushes him off before saying he has something to say to him as a footballer, that he wants to challenge Snuffy, telling him not to retire. The Uber's captain lowers his head for a moment with a smile on his face, suddenly realizing that maybe Barou was right, maybe some part of him was scared of the future. As Snuffy says, Mick, that advice you gave me, I think I can finally believe you," referring to Mick's final words to Snuffy, that everything starts with a crazy, nonsensical dream. There's no doubt that the tragedy of what happened to his friend left a mark on Snuffy. It seemed as though winning the 5 leagues was just a job he needed to carry out, rather than a burning passion that he really wanted to. And after something like that, after seeing firsthand how scary and cruel the world can be, it's sometimes difficult to keep that fire ablaze. The safe route of never wanting anything, of pushing all those desires and dreams to one side as unachievable, is always there, but watching Barou play, Snuffy realizes that that's no way to live. This whole time he's been so calm, more observing his team than actually being immersed in the match himself. But watching Barou go rogue, Snuffy couldn't help but yell in excitement. That side of him that just loves this game so fiercely is still there. It was buried under this layer of fear that he wasn't even aware of until now. The way his eyes light up as he raises his head is not only such a beautiful character moment to him, where he realizes it's fine for him to chase this crazy desire of his, but to me it was a reminder that no matter what the world throws at you, no matter how terrible everything may seem, no matter how empty you might feel, that fire is always there. The phoenix can always be reborn. Before he's a footballer, he's a person. But that doesn't mean Snuffy isn't a footballer. He's in fact the greatest footballer in the world. And nothing will keep his fire out forever. Thank you so much for watching this very long video. If you enjoyed it, I've got other videos like this. Once again, thank you for watching and have a great day.